Medieval castles are often seen as symbols of power, luxury, and greatness. But the truth is, living in a castle was a daily struggle. Castles were not built for comfort. They were built for war. Thick stone walls, narrow windows, and massive towers existed for one reason only: to survive attacks at any cost. But this protection turned castles into cold stone traps. Sunlight barely reached inside. Even during the day, halls remained dark and damp. Fireplaces warmed only those standing close. Everyone else froze. During winter, castle interiors were almost as cold as the outside. People slept fully clothed, wrapped in layers of blankets, sometimes even next to animals, just to stay warm. Stone floors, wet walls, mold everywhere. And that wasn't the worst part. There was almost no sanitation. Toilets were built directly into the walls. All waste fell down into moats or beneath the castle itself. The smell was unbearable, especially in summer. Rats ruled these places. They ran through corridors, cellars, and sleeping chambers. Fleas and insects carried deadly diseases people didn't yet understand. Life inside a castle was a constant battle, not only against enemies outside the walls, but against the conditions within. And this is only the beginning. Life inside a medieval castle was not only about cold and darkness. Every day brought another challenge: survival among filth, hunger, and disease. The food we see in movies had little to do with reality. Grand feasts were rare and held only on special occasions. Most of the time, castle inhabitants ate simple and harsh meals. The diet was based on bread and porridge. Bread was often hard, moldy, and mixed with sand or straw. Meat was eaten infrequently, and when it was often already spoiled. Spices were used not for flavor, but to hide the smell of rot. Fruits and vegetables spoiled quickly, especially during winter. Fresh food was a luxury available to very few. Sometimes food was stored for months without any safe preservation. Water was dangerous as well. Clean sources were rare. People drew water from wells or rivers often contaminated by waste. Drinking it was risky, but there was no alternative. Because of this, many preferred weak beer or wine. Alcohol was considered safer than water. Even children drank diluted alcoholic beverages. Hygiene in castles was extremely poor. Washing was believed to be dangerous. People thought hot water opened the pores and let diseases in. Baths were rarely used, and clothes were seldom washed. Smells were constant companions of castle life. Smoke from hearths, sweat, rotting food, and waste blended into a suffocating air. Summer was the worst. Diseases spread quickly. People had no knowledge of bacteria or viruses. Any infection could become deadly. A simple wound could easily turn into a serious infection. Doctors treated patients with bloodletting, prayers, and amulets. Often these methods made things worse. Epidemics wiped out entire castles. Plague, dysentery, and fever spared no one, peasants or nobles alike. Stone walls offered no protection from disease. Life in a castle was a constant struggle, not only against enemies, but against the body itself. And all of this was considered normal. People knew no other way of living. They were born into these conditions, and they died in them. Medieval castles were built for war, and a siege was the most terrifying ordeal for those inside. Thick walls and high towers could hold back enemies for weeks or months, but life inside the castle became a nightmare. Enemies did not come alone. They brought noise, fear, and death. People inside lived in constant tension. Each day could be their last. Food ran out quickly during a siege. Porridge, bread, and spoiled meat became the only diet. Water, if wells were captured or poisoned, could be deadly. Often people had to drink rainwater or water from marshes full of bacteria. The conditions inside the castle during a siege were hellish. Cold, dampness, and horrible smells combined with disease. Diseases spread faster than enemy swords. Plague, dysentery, and fevers claimed lives faster than projectiles destroyed walls. Many tried to escape at night, to survive, but beyond the walls awaited death from swords, arrows, and fire. People lost hope. Fear turned to despair, and despair into chaos. Not only commoners suffered. Even nobles and knights were not safe from the horrors of siege. Blood, fear, screams, and death were everywhere. Every night felt like the last. Psychology of people during a siege was shattered. Inability to control events, constant threat, hunger, and disease turned people into slaves of fear. Even the bravest lost their minds when they saw friends and family die around them. When a castle fell, it meant complete destruction. Enemies killed or enslaved, destroyed everything they could. Stone walls that were meant to protect life became a tomb for those who could not escape. Even if the castle survived, the aftermath left scars for generations. Hunger, disease, destroyed buildings, and psychological trauma made life after the siege long and difficult. Life in a castle was not just a struggle against cold or disease. It was a struggle with constant fear, inevitable death, and personal weakness. Every day, every night, every minute could be the last. And this truth was harsh. Medieval castles are not symbols of comfort and wealth. They are symbols of survival, horror, and death. What we see in fairy tales and movies is only an illusion. When a siege ended, the war for the people did not. It simply changed its form. If a castle fell, chaos followed. Enemies entered not as rulers, but as destroyers. Homes were looted, property destroyed, people killed or taken captive. Those who survived lost everything: their shelter, their families, their past lives. Survivors often became refugees. Without money, without protection, without hope, they wandered into the unknown, searching for shelter or dying along the way. The medieval world was merciless to the weak. Even when a castle survived, victory was fragile. Food supplies were ruined or gone. People were weakened by hunger and disease. The wounded often died days or weeks after the siege, because infections could not be treated. A castle after a siege was a place of silence, a silence filled with death. Empty halls, broken walls, traces of blood and fire. Every corner reminded people of what they had lost. Children suffered the most. They grew up surrounded by destruction, fear, and constant danger. Violence became normal to them, and death became part of everyday life. Psychological trauma was never treated. No one spoke about it. People simply continued living, burying fear, pain, and despair deep inside. A medieval person rarely lived to old age. Constant stress, malnutrition, disease, and fear slowly destroyed both body and mind. But they knew no other world. Over time, castles stopped being places of life. They turned into ruins. Stone by stone, history erased the traces of real suffering. Today we see castles as beautiful monuments. We photograph them, admire their architecture, and dream of living in such places. But behind every wall lies the truth. Castles were not symbols of romance. They were symbols of survival, pain, and death. History turned them into legends, but reality was far harsher. A castle is not a fairy tale. It is a place where people fought for their lives every day, and too often they lost.